Alright, I'm going to do a commentary for a 25 Darkheart Thicket from a week and a half or so ago. I was in the last fort week, and I'm going to go over talents, rotation-wise, what I'm doing, tricks for boss, especially on this boss. I think I do every single one of the jumps as a mage, or at least you're able to do almost every single one. So I am running Verse File, and I'm running the Buzzing Rune, and then I'll go into my talents. I didn't actually show it at the beginning here, so I'll show you guys in here. So talent-wise, on Fort Week, I did run Frostbite for this key. The only reason I kind of ran Frostbite for this one is there are a decent amount of AoE pulls, not like mass AoE, but I also wanted to run them for the cat jumps that you'll have in the first pull, and I think it's the third pull of the key. You also have in the second area after the first boss, all those mobs are freezable. Most people don't think that the keepers are freezable. The mobs that spawn the green mushrooms that you have to avoid. But I did decide to run Frostbite for this one, just because it is Fort Week. And then other than that, for General Tree, I did take Ice Flows instead of Shimmer. I've just always been playing Ice Flows. And then I ran Spell Steal and Remove Curse. The only reason I ran Spell Steal was because I needed to get down to Mirror Image, and I didn't want to spend 2 talents points for Tempest Barrier or Winter's Protection. And then I kind of just ran Remove Curse just because there is a curse in Darkheart Thicket, and since it is Fort Week, the Curse of Isolation does hurt a little bit, but it's not really required. It's just kind of a beneficial thing to run here. And other than that, the typical build for everything else. I didn't run Ring of Frost. I've been thinking of toying around with Ring of Frost on Fort for a few keys, like Blackrock Hold for the bats, or Darkheart Thicket for the cat jumps, or like Waycrest Manor for the Gorger jumps. But other than that, pretty basic general tree. And then, like I said, I ran Frostbite instead of Ray of Frost for my spec talents. We did start early. Typically, you can Mass Barrier before the pull, and you can actually get Mass Barrier for the first pull. I ended up just Mass Barriering here. I do pre-pop Mirror Images just to have the DR going in case I get jumped by a cat. And then I precast Blizzard and do Orb, Icy Veins, Common Storm, Cone of Cold, Balefire, Orb, Common Storm, Blizzard, Shifting Power. Typical lineup. And then I am focusing the Grizzly. You can focus the cat if you want, but I decided to be focusing the Grizzly. Another reason why I did run Frostbite for this week is because it was Spiteful. Obviously this one is from a little over like a week ago. It was last Fort Week. So... And then I altered the second Maddening Roar. If it ends up getting a third one, which it never should, especially if you're lusting this pack, then you can like G-Invis or Ice Cold for it. Now you don't have a whole lot going into this pack. This is basically just your second lust pack. But you will have Cone of Cold coming up. And then these Razor Beaks aren't freezable in this pull, so if you are using Glacial Spike, you should be looking to Glacial Spike Flurry on these guys, or make sure they already have Winter's Chill. The casters are, but the Razor Beaks aren't. They're some of the only unfreezable mobs in this key, along with the bears. Everything else in this key, I believe, is freezable. And now I should have Glacial Spiked into a Ice Nova there. Since I had Ice Nova. The reason I did the Frost Nova is because I believe my target still had 1 Winter's Chill. I'm going to go back and look. Oops, I did not want me to go back that far. So if your target ever has only 1 Winter's Chill left on it and you're casting a Glacial Spike, do Glacial Spike into either your Pet Freeze or a Frost Nova, because then it won't consume that Winter's Chill stack. If that target is not freezable, that is. It doesn't really matter if the target is freezable. If the target is not freezable, then you want to make sure that you're using Winter's Chill properly. So here it is on a Runer. So I did Frost Nova. I didn't need to Frost Nova this one. I could have Ice Nova'd because the Runer is a freezable mob versus the Razor Beaks aren't. So if I was proud targeting the Razor Beaks, which I think I'm targeting the Runers here just for interrupt sake, just to try and get one of them dead. And now that I'm on the Razor Beaks, I'm not worrying about Glacial Spiking Ice Novaing. I'm Glacial Spike Flurrying just to make sure that I'm shattering on my Prio mob. I probably should have popped Orb here, especially because there's going to be Spitefuls after the pack, so I could get a little Blizzard CDR, but it's not that big of an issue. Now, these Nightclaws are the reason that I did decide that was another additional reason why I wanted to run Frostbite for this key, just to have the chance to freeze them when they're going to do their jump. So you can see the timer of their next jump. Which unfortunately it didn't freeze any of them. The jumps definitely hurt on Fort weeks. They don't hurt as much on like Tyrannical weeks and stuff like that, but obviously this week those jumps are gonna truck you pretty bad. If you want to pay attention to the timers, you can pre-alter time them. So if you alter time at full health, and then obviously going into this pack, it's an AoE pack, so typical AoE opener, Blizzard into Orb, Icy Veins, Comet Storm, Balefire. I didn't have Cone of Cold here, so I could have saved Balefire, which I probably should have, but I probably didn't because I know the next pack is going to be either a single target or the double bears. And since I don't have Ray, Balefire loses a little bit of value on single target because typically you pair Balefire with either your Cone of Cold combo or your Ray of Frost and single target. So not having Ray of Frost, it loses a little bit of value, but you can just send it if you don't have Ray. You just send it after a Glacial cast while the Glacial is in the air. Now this is an Invis skip. We don't have a Rogue or anything else to Invis skip it, so I just use G-Invis for it. And now, I think I don't know if I called it, but Druids can do almost all these on their own. But on this one, I basically decide, just because it's a no-comms pug, I'm just going to decide to do all of them. As a mage, you have, at least as a Frost mage, I have defensives for almost every single one. So you can pay attention to the Grievous Sleep timer. And you can pre-alter every single one. Well, not every single one. I believe it's every third. So this one I altered. So the next one, you want to make sure you're cycling your defensives. So I'll use alter for this one. The next one I can use like Mirror Image and have like barrier rolling. So I pop Mirror Image and I have to wait for the next leap. I do barrier. I barrier after the fact. On a higher key, especially on a Tyrannical key, you might actually need the barrier prior. Because I am running Diverted Energy, I decided to use the barrier afterwards because I know I'm not going to get one shot on it from it, and then I want to just get max value from Diverted Energy to see if I can heal me past the 90%. So you saw there, it used the entire barrier and healed me a little bit the next tick, and then as long as I'm healed 4% by the next time the leap is happening, I should be good. And this is just baited on the furthest range. So this next one, because I used Alter for the first, I used Mirror and Barrier for the second. This third one, I'm using Ice Cold for. So you just pre-Ice Cold it. You can Ice Cold afterwards, but I just pre-Ice Cold it to get the DR instead of Ice Colding afterwards. And now, because I canceled my Shifting Power early, I actually don't have Alter time for every third one. So this next one, I'm going to be a little dry. So I have both Mass Barrier and Barrier that I'm assuming I'm going to use for it. Yeah, so I used Barrier beforehand because I got ticked by the Nightfall, and then I used Mass Barrier after. And now I'm just hoping the healer heals me up. And now this next one I know I'm going to have Alter time for. I should have already used Cold Snap at this point since I used Block. So that's bad on me for not using Cold Snap yet. I altered this. You saw me use Cold Snap there. So my assumption is on this next one, I'm either going to use Cold Snap or I'm going to do the Barrier. I probably will Cold Snap. Oh, that Grievous Sleep actually went on the healer. So if we go back, this Grievous Sleep, it went on the Evoker. Which the Evoker dodged it? Which is, I'm not sure if you actually can dodge it. That's something that I probably should test around with to see if you can actually dodge the leap lead. If you can dodge it, that'll actually be a huge thing for it. So I had nothing for this one. I had no defenses rolling other than I just had a barrier from beforehand. Which you see the barrier with the leap hit me down to 70% health. So as long as they heal me 20% for the next tick, it'll drop the bleed. And sometimes I've noticed, I'm not sure what does this. Sometimes I just don't get a bleed. And I'm not sure why. I just didn't get a bleed. And I'm not sure exactly what happens there. I kind of want to test some things out to see why that happens. But yeah. So now this next one, I know it's going to be happening. I'm not going to... I pre-alter time it again. I didn't have a bleed there again. I'm not sure why that happens. But obviously if that's something that I can replicate, that'll be very good to know. This one I have nothing. I either G-invised or I G-invised this one, knowing the leap's going to come out. Sometimes the timer's a little off. So you saw the leap there only hit me for 20%. But I do have a bleed this time. But it should be like every third one you should be able to have altered for, because you should have shifting for every single one. I think like every like 2 you won't have it for every third one, just because of your shifting power timing is a little less than your alter. And I ice coded this one. I probably didn't need it because the next pack, the boss was going to die here soon anyways. I probably didn't need it. But otherwise for that, just... I had mirror just for the one prior. But just make sure you're cycling your defenses for this. You should be able to get almost every single one. I think when I did the 26 Darkheart last week on Tyrannical, our Druid actually does every single one. And then when the Druid doesn't really have a whole lot, which they should have Ursun's Vigor or whatever it's called for every single one. But if they don't, that's when you can hop out and use, Ice Cold, you can use Alter Time, you can use any of your defensives. So Mage is really good dealing with the leaps for baiting in. And it always is baited on the furthest range player. Especially with comps this tier, it seems like, obviously with like DH Aug, they're going to be a lot closer to melee. So it's either going to be typically between you and the healer in order to do those baits. There'll be some, like a Mistweaver comp, you might be the only ranged. And then obviously this is just the typical AoE opener, Icy with Balefire and your Corn and Cold combo. You want to be focusing the Dryads in this pack. The Dryads are the only thing that really do damage. The Blossoms, the only thing they do is do the Rip Blasts, which is just the thing on the ground that you have to dodge. I should be sending Glacial here. I'm holding Glacials way too long instead of just full sending. Now, instead of focusing the Keepers, so with these packs, the Keepers, what they do is they heal the Blossoms when they're still alive. Personally, I like attacking the Dryads first, just because the Dryads are the only thing that actually do damage to the group. So it's the only chance that you can have to like dying. If you want to, like, technically killing the pack faster would be to kill the Keepers first and then the Dryads. But I typically go for the Dryads first. And then if you should try and bait these mushrooms all in relatively the same spot. So if you want to stack with your other people, the mushrooms are baited on where players are standing. So now that the Dryad's dead, I focus on the Keeper now. And most people don't think the Keeper is freezable, but it is. So you can use your Glacial Spike Ice Nova combos work fine. You don't need to use your Glacial Spike Flurries. But you can see that, I'll pause it here, once it gets, you see it's frozen by Frostbite. So these mobs are actually rootable and CCable. And now this pack is dead, I'm guessing the tank's gonna chain it into the next Dryad pack. So like I said, the Blossoms don't really do anything. The only important mobs here are the Dryads and the Keepers. I got hit by the Root Blast there and did a big dummy. I just wasn't paying attention to the ground effects. Now see here, typically I could just be focusing these Blossoms. I am keeping like Blizzard and Orb and stuff on them and using my resets. But I am trying to focus the Dryad. We do actually end up pulling the Dryad. It looks like the Druid healer accidentally pulled them. Or pulled them on purpose, I'm not sure which one. But I'm focusing the Dryad this entire time. Just because I know that this is the only mob that can actually kill us, other than the mushrooms. And our mushroom management here is going to be a little bad, just because we're not stacking. Like I said, if you can, I would stack the green mushrooms as much as possible. Because the room will get so full that you just don't have anywhere to move. So you see here, now I'm kind of stuck, and I haven't used my Cone of Cold combo at all in this pack, which obviously isn't good, especially because I have Balefire up. So this was an issue a few weeks ago. I'll go back to 10 seconds. The graphic for this, it was actually smaller than the explosion radius, which it's now seemed to have been fixed. But you see I'm literally like standing in this spot, and I triggered it. I obviously was not in the mushroom swirl, so that was a hotfix that went in last week to actually fix the visual range. Or I think it's actually to fix the explosion range. The visual is still the same, but it's now its explosion is actually accurate with the visual. Now I am trying to get shifting power here up from another lust. So when you're in a group that doesn't have an augmentation evoker, you want to try and actually use your... You'll always want to be trying to use your lust on cooldown regardless, but especially in a group that you have a augmentation evoker, you can get an extra lust in each lust window. So since the cooldown, your exhaustion from lust is 10 minutes, technically your lust cooldown is 412 due to having 4 shifting powers, which it isn't exactly going to be 412, but it'll be like, that's the best case scenario. You should be able to get an extra lust in every single lust window. So if you have an augmentation in your group and you know that there's another person that can lust for your group, try and use your shifting power as aggressive as possible so that you can get extra lust, because over a course of a key that can lead up to 1 or maybe even 2 extra lust for yourself. So you saw here I just aggressively used shifting power in order to get this, and now I should be able to use lust here if I pay attention, which I did not. I should have used lust there because I still would have had this on cooldown. And then obviously the augmentation evoker could have lusted the next time. But I did use my Cone of Cold combo, so out of that whole pack, this is the only time I haven't used my Cone of Cold. And now I use my Orb, Comet Storm, Balefire. So I actually missed a Comet Storm there with my Cone of Cold combo. I didn't Comet Storm before my Cone of Cold, so I actually lost a Comet Storm use. But then, like I said, for these packs here, you want to be focusing the Keepers, because the Keepers are what heal the Blossoms up as much as possible. And now you can use your CCs to stop the Root Blasts. And now what I did here, because I noticed that this room was going to get really crowded, I popped Ice Cold and ran through a Mushroom. It didn't really help a whole lot, because then me and the Augmentation Evoker didn't stack again, so it kind of just re-put another one there. But you can use Dragon's Breath, you can use Blast Wave to interrupt the Root Blasts, which this pull is a little bit difficult and a little rough for melees because there's so many of the Root Blasts going off. As you see, we're kind of just skyrocketing our deaths. But now that there's no Keepers alive, obviously the Blossoms are taking damage, so this is kind of just a mass AoE pull. And now this is your typical just AoE shatters. So I didn't have Ice Nova, so I Glacial Spiked into a Frost Nova. And then I used my Cone of Cold combo. So Blizzard, Orb, Comet Storm, Cone, Orb, Comet Storm, and then I went into another Blizzard. And now I should Glacial Spike into a Flirt, or Glacial Spike into Ice Nova, which I did. And now I am talented into Time Manipulation, which is the talent that every Fingers of Frost you send, or every Shattered Ice Lance reduces your crowd control abilities by 1 second. So Time Manipulation, especially for Frost, and especially on Fort Weeks, is definitely a really important talent for Frost Mages to take, because it will reduce the cooldown of Ice Nova. It also reduces the cooldown of Blast Wave and Frost Nova. I'm not sure about Dragon's Breath though. I think it does though, but I'm not positive on that one. Again, focusing the Dryad. Even though I could be focusing the 2 targets of the Blossoms, the Dryad's the only mob here that is any danger to the group. So I'm focusing the Dryads. And now we can pull these Blossoms into the next pack if we want, just because the only thing they do is the Root Blast. And now you want to make sure you have AoE stops and kicks set up for these Dwellers, because their Tormenting Eye does hurt. And it's not something that you can blink out of. I believe you can hard block out of it, but obviously I'm not talented in a hard block. I'm talented into ice cold, so. I should be using my Cone of Cold here, and I should be using my Balefire as well. I should have used my Balefire as soon as I Cone of Cold it, just to get the value from it, because it doesn't get as much value in single target. Now I went to Blast Wave. The only downside with Blast Wave, especially on Fort Weeks when you're taking Frostbite, is you can't really control when Frostbite actually freezes the mobs, so it's a little inconsistent. It's especially unfortunate with, you know, a Monk with Rop, or a Druid with Typhoon, or anything that's actually just like a knockback instead of like an actual stun. So, you know, like Leg Sweep always works, Dragon's Breath will always work. Anything that's an actual stun rather than a knock, you don't have to worry about with Frostbite, but if you are running Frostbite, just make sure you and your group are aware of the chance that Frostbite can freeze the mobs that you're actually trying to CC. Now for this next boss, you want to be cycling your defensives for the Shattered Earth. New to me, I didn't know it at this time. It's something I've recently found out. You can blink out of the... If you ever get targeted with a Crushing Grip, you're actually able to blink from the cast. I'll explain it when it does show up. But for every single Shattered Earth that happens, you want to be cycling your defensives. So on hierarchies, it's much, especially on Tyrannical, it's much more of an issue. On Fortified, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. You can just have a barrier every single time a Fortified one is happening. So you saw it barely hurt me on a Fortified key. And now I did also help on Fortified keys because I'm not saving Blink for the Crushing Grip. I typically, because I'm running Blink instead of Shimmer, it removes us from stuns. So I walk into my Shattered Root sometimes, which roots you, and then I blink out, and that just removes that Shattered Root. So it just makes so there's one less ad for the tank to deal with throughout the fight. Especially on Tyrannical weeks, it's very helpful. Just be very careful to know that you actually have your blink up when you go into the roots, because the dots that they put on you do hurt. So this is the Crushing Grip. So the Crushing Grip you're actually able to blink out of, but it's something that I just recently found out. I typically use my big defenses for Crushing Grip at this point in time because I didn't know about the blink tech at the time. But the way the blink tech works is as soon as Crushing Grip cast is ended, that's going to be like when your tank is in midair. So typically you'd want to get a little bit further away from the boss, like I was kind of doing. And then as soon as it ends, like right now, I should be able to blink out of it. So you saw the tank is getting thrown at me right now. You should be able to blink out of it, and neither you or the tank take any damage. For this one, like I just said, I didn't really know about it yet, so I'm just using my big defensives. So I use G-Invis for this one. You can use G-Invis, you can use Mirror Images, you can use your Ice Cold. It's a lot more of an issue on Tyrannical weeks. On Fortified, it's not as big of an issue, but... So you see here, on this Shattered Earth, I was not paying attention, and I didn't have any defenses up for it. I just tried taking a bear. I blinked, and I got GCD locked on my barrier. On this 25 Fortified, it still hit me for 650k. So obviously was not paying attention. I should have waited until after the Shattered Earth went out to clear my root, because the root actually took me for like 20% of my health beforehand. Obviously unfortunate that I had just recently popped Icy Veins too, because I lost it. Yeah, other than that, now that it's going to be AoE, you want to make sure you're actually getting your Orb CDR from the mobs here, and you can use your Cone of Cold combos on these ads. And I didn't use anything for this one, but because I was full health, I didn't die. Obviously, you should have your barrier for every single one. Like I said, on the Fortified keys, it's not as big of an issue, but as this goes further up, you definitely need to make sure you're having big defenses for every single Shattered Earth. And the Shattered Earth are about 30 seconds apart. I think it's like 35. So I didn't have any defensives for this one, and I got hit down to 13% health. So if I would have died again, that would have been obviously my fault, and it was just something I wasn't paying attention to. But I know on hierarchies as well, I'm looking to start talenting into Tempest Barrier, just because it is another... If you can talent 2 points in a Tempest Barrier, it's basically 6% stamina every time you blink, which is obviously very beneficial, especially as our health pools get higher. Now again, just like last time, I should not have gone into my root before the Shattered Earth, because I lose my whole shield that I had on prior. This one I did mass barrier for us, so you see I still got chunked down. I actually mass barriered after the cast again, so I was very bad with my defensive usage on this fight for all of the Shattered Earths. Obviously I died on the one, and then I've been late on barrier on 2 other ones. So it's something you really need to pay attention to. Shattered Earth, I had a barrier, so I didn't really worry about it this time. I already had a barrier on me. And I didn't pop Icy Veins here, knowing that our next pull is going to be, it's obviously Fortified Week. The last, I think it was like the last like 8% or something in the boss, I didn't have any cooldowns. But I decided I wanted to save my Icy Veins for the trash mobs here. And I didn't Balefire. I should have Balefired here, especially because I used Icy Veins. And now, these, on Fortified Weeks, these are obviously going to hurt a lot more. I typically like to have a pre-barrier on, and then you can obviously barrier during it as well, as the explosion goes off. But if you don't have that, I always like to alter time. As soon as the first like 1 or 2 explosions go off, I alter back to full health. So you saw I altered there and went back, and then still dropped down to like 40% health. But make sure you have defensives rolling for, especially on Fort Weeks, for when these blobs die. And now for the Blood Tainted Furies, I typically like to save. I like to use a Glacial Spike right before they're going to cast their Blood Metamorphosis. It's not a big of an issue this week. Last week it was a huge issue because of Raging. But make sure you're just using your AoE CCs for this. So whether it's so you see our DH Silent Sigiled. And as long as we have kicks or an AoE CC, we're fine. So that was fine there. When it was Raging Week, it was a lot bigger of an issue because you couldn't do anything below 25% health. So I had been saving Glacial Spikes for right before they cast Blood Metamorphosis. Which it does seem that Blood Metamorphosis is typically, if you don't do any interrupts, or you use like AoE stuns, it seems to be their 3rd cast. So they'll do 2 Blood Bolt casts and then a Blood Metamorphosis. I'm not sure if it's HP based or just like spell queuing, but it's been pretty consistent with it being its 3rd cast as long as you're using AoE stops. So you saw our Augmentation Evoker used Effort for this one. And then I used Barrier after I'd already dropped down just because I diverted energy. I wouldn't entirely recommend, if you are talented in a diverted energy, I'd recommend trying to play around it a little bit, but if it's something that's like a one-shot like the Shatter Earth time, I would not recommend playing around with it and just have the barrier on prior. Okay, so I use defensives. I cycle defensives on the Earth Shattering Roar for these two and Downdraft. I do game my Alter Time and my Barrier on Downdraft. You should have Alter Time for every other Downdraft that happens. Or for every other Earth-Shaking Roar. Or it is Downdraft, yeah. So I Alter Timed in Melee, which I Alter Timed in a very bad spot, and I was not paying attention to his spell queuing. So now I have nothing for this Downdraft. I had I had the Evoker Shield for this one. And then I typically like saving my Barrier. I could have Barriered now and gotten use out of my Diverted Energy, but I've been saving it for after the fact. Just to protect against the Earth-Shattering Roar. But you can be using your Barrier, especially with Diverted Energy, during the Downdraft. I have been waiting afterwards because on hierarchies, especially on Tyrannical, Earth-Shattering Roar itself, if you don't have Barrier, will just one-shot you. And now this Downdraft I Alter Timed in Melee, so I didn't really worry about the damage that I'm going to take here. I wouldn't worry about the damage you're taking in Downdraft. The healer should be able to heal it up before the Earth-Shattering Roar comes out, but you need to be very careful because the Earth-Shaking Roar will basically one-shot you on hierarchies. So I think if I didn't use a defensive, it does one-shot me on this 25 fort key. So I waited as long as possible. I alter timed back, and then you can try and bait the earth-shaking roars. I'm not sure exactly who it baits on, but you see here, I almost got one shot, and I didn't have anything rolling. I had no mirages, I had no barrier. We'll see how much health it does. It hits me for 86% of my health, and then I ran into an egg and got meleeed. I also may or may not have tanked a key last week, a 28 Darkheart, or a 27 Darkheart due to that. So be very careful of running into the eggs. But now again for this downdraft, I won't have alter time. So you get pushed back less and less the closer you are to the boss. So if you can, you want to start as close to the center of the boss as possible. So you see I'm literally not moving back at all. And then I have mass barrier for this next one. I mass buried the group. And we baited Earth-Shaking Roar. Which now I am kind of stuck in this spot, so I think I end up blinking over and then using Downdraft. So this would have been my other use of Balefire. I actually didn't use it there. It looks like I wanted to, but I just didn't cast it. If you are using Balefire in single target and you don't have Ray Talented, you want to use it after you cast Glacial Spike, since Glacial Spike damage is calculated on hit. If you use Balefire while Glacial Spike is traveling, your Glacial Spike will still benefit from the damage buff from Balefire itself. So I blink over and then I alter time. You can ask your tank to get some eggs during this boss as well, so that you can use your Corner Cold resets for Orb and Common Storm. And now I used my barrier there, which I shouldn't have, especially because I just alter timed. If I hadn't alter timed, using barrier isn't a terrible use, because I obviously still have my other big defensives. I still have Ice Cold and G-Invis and stuff. On hierarchies, you'll most likely need to use your Ice Colds and G-Invises for the Earth-Shaking Roar. For these ones, just the barrier itself was fine for me to survive. And then again, I saved Icy Veins, knowing that next pack is going to be a trash pack. So the main thing there is every other downdraft, you should be able to alter time. And as long as you don't die during the downdraft, your alter time will, as long as you're full health when you alter time before downdraft starts, you can alter time back to being full health and being like in melee, and then properly bait the Earth-Shaking Roar. So this was part of another. This is why I'm guessing I saved my Balefire, because I knew it was going to be a big AoE pack. And these are the packs that you will, if you do take Decurse, this is the packs you need to be aware of. So it'll be the Curse of Isolation that these. I'm not sure exactly what the name of this. I'm not sure if it's the Stalkers that cast it or something else. But the main things you need to be aware of in these packs, the Firebolts aren't too big of an issue. They only go on tanks. But the other thing you need to be aware of on these packs are the Dread Infernos. Those are the abilities that will like one-shot people. So you saw I actually, in this sequence, I just DB'd. I DB'd this, and then one of these mobs is going to be casting Dread Inferno, and I Blast Waved. Unfortunately, the mob that was casting Dread Inferno was not frozen by Frostbite. You see now that the mobs are all separated. It's because this mob here that I was targeting was originally frozen by Frostbite and didn't get knocked back. So that's what I was talking about earlier. You need to be aware if you are running Frostbite and keys, because you can't count on Blast Wave to interrupt those. And now you saw I interrupted the Dread Inferno cast, which was targeted on me. We did use a B-res there, unfortunately, which I don't think we should have. We should have just killed the Spitefuls and then had a normal res. But our timer is looking okay, especially because it's a fortified week. If it's a Tyrannical week, because obviously it would be a little tight. But These bats are very bad for the tank. They put a very nasty dot on the tank that they need to run away from. So obviously as a Frost Mage is very beneficial because you can freeze them while the tank is kiting. Our tank didn't really kite them because, you know, VDH things, but... Oh, yeah, you see our tanks just started kiting, and our tank just kited, and we used another B-Res on it. So I think at this point we have no B-Reses going into the boss, which isn't great. Typically, I like saving B-Reses for, especially for this last boss. Yeah, I think I just asked it here. All it would have been is we would have had to kill those Spitefulls, and then we could you know, normal res, but... Now again here, the typical AoE opener. I'll go over this again. I open with a precasted Blizzard. So going in with Blizzard. Followed by Orb, Comet Storm, Icy Veins, which I went to click Icy Veins and missed it. You don't worry about that. And then Cone of Cold, and then back to your Balefire, Orb, Comet Storm. Interrupted the Dread Inferno cast. And now, because I know all these mobs are freezable, I use the Glacial Spike into the Ice Nova. I've made a lot of mistakes on this key, which obviously going back at VOD reviewing is a very good thing to see how you can improve on keys. I've made a lot of mistakes in terms of defensive usage, offensive CD usage, just a bunch of things. So I'm still making mistakes, which shows I still have room to improve for these. And now for this boss, he has 3 different mechanics. He has Nightmare Bolt. When the boss hits you with Nightmare Bolt, you need to basically stack on people or else you're silenced. He has Feed on the Weak, which is just a big ticking dot. This is something that can be like invised for mages, or you can use Alter Time for it. That's an issue, a spot where I would use Alter Time. And then Growing Paranoia, you just have to get away from people, and if you touch anybody else, you get feared. So you see our DH got Waking Nightmare, the Nightmare Bolt. So now they're all stacked. Feed the Weak is on our Druid. You're seeing they're getting trucked pretty heavily. And then Growing Paranoia is on our Evoker. Nightmare Bolt on the Healer. You see I'm stacking on them for Waking Nightmare. And now this was the usage of Balefire I was talking about in single target. Because I have Balefire up now, I Glacial Spike, and I use Balefire after the Glacial Spike cast. Because it will still benefit from it. And now I'm getting Growing Paranoia, so I run out of the group. It's basically if someone else touches your little the AoE on the ground, then you will be the one that gets feared. It's very dangerous in P2. It's not as dangerous in P1, but obviously you don't want to be getting feared at all. So I'm getting Growing Paranoia again, so I'm just staying out and ranged. And then when he does phase, he phases at 50%. That's when you're going to want to be using big defensives. So for me, I ended up just using Mass Barrier. I think I use Mass Barrier to make sure everybody else has a barrier, and then I use Mirror Image. It's the only thing when damage does happen. And then we're also all stacking in Darkness. And we get a Zephyr as well. You see it still does hit pretty heavily. And then I'm getting Growing Paranoia here. The difference in P2, so this is when we did Lust, is that these little AoE swirlies will be spawning. So there are set spots, and they also are baited on where players are at. So if you can try and bait them away. But if the boss gets hit by any of the stacks, he gets a damage buff. So you see he has 1 stack of the damage buff now, 2 stacks, 3 stacks. Every time he gets hit by a swirly is a damage buff for him. So he'll get 4 or 5 now. Unfortunately, there's sometimes that you can't really make it so he doesn't get hit by those, like when he's channeling like Feed on the Weak and one of them spawns on him. But typically this is why you want to be trying to spawn the Swirlies not on melee, because he will just get the damage buff. So you see he's at 6 stacks, he's at 7 now, and Feed the Weak is obviously hitting a lot harder now. Every single one is a stacking damage amp. So hopefully his damage amp will fall now. Yep, it fell back to 1. So you see our DH did when, especially if he does have these damage, the damage amp from these, and he's casting a Nightmare Bolt on you, that's when you need to be using big defensive. So you see our DH almost gets one shot by this Nightmare Bolt. So be very careful for those. Pay attention to the amount of stacks of the buff he has, especially if you're getting talented or targeted by one of the abilities. And if you do get Feed the Weak on you, it never went on me this entire fight, so I didn't have to use it. I had Growing Paranoia though. If you get Feed the Weak, you can just G-Invis, and it cancels the mechanic. So it's a very beneficial time to use G-Invis for it. It's the same thing as like Shadow Meld and stuff like that. So that was a very scuffed 25 Darkheart Thicket from like a week and a half ago when it was Volcanic Spiteful. Obviously we timed the key, so you know it was good enough, but obviously there's a lot of things that I've noticed looking back on the VOD to see that I improved on. I missed a lot of Glacial Spike shatters in AoE. I was shattering with Flurry instead of with Ice Nova in AoE, or I was using like Frost Nova when I had Ice Nova on cooldown. I didn't use Icy Veins basically on cooldown. I misused my defensives, especially on like the second boss or on Oakheart. But yeah, there's a lot of things obviously I can improve. I obviously did decently well in damage here. I did 307k. But obviously there's still a lot of room for improvement. So that is it for the commentary for this 25 Fort Darkheart. I'm probably going to be doing one soon. I want to try getting videos out for every single key first before I start like repeating videos, just so that I have like a baseline and that you guys have like different VODs from all the different keys to begin with. But I'm kind of going to start repeating them once I get one out for every single video, or for every single key. So like last week I have a 26 Darkheart Tyrannical that I'll probably end up doing one here on, but it won't be until I have all of the other ones done first. So I think I still have 4 left to do. So yeah, that is the commentary for the 25 Darkheart Thicket. I'll be posting this on YouTube, and obviously still doing these commentaries on Twitch still if I'm live. Whenever I'm live I sometimes do commentaries. Kind of depends on whether LFG is dead or not. But yeah, that'll be all for the commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure you give me a follow or a sub if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you guys have any comments or questions, make sure you comment down below. But thank you all again, and I hope you guys enjoyed the commentary.